The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. They say wisdom begins when you realize you know nothing. But what if knowing nothing is itself a kind of knowledge? What if the fool, stumbling through life with no map, no plan, and no pretense of certainty, is closer to truth than the scholar buried in books? The fool has walked through every mythology, every tarot deck, and every ancient story we've ever told ourselves. He stands at the edge of the cliff, one foot dangling over the abyss, a flower in his hand, and a dog nipping at his heels. He doesn't look down. He doesn't need to. He's already falling. But here's the thing about the fool. He never lands. He just keeps falling, forever, through layers of meaning we're still trying to decode. He's the zero card in the tarot, the nothing that contains everything, the beginning that never quite begins, and in that endless descent, he's searching. Not for answers, because answers would stop the fall. He's searching for wisdom, the kind that can only be found when you stop pretending you have it all figured out. So who is the fool, really? And why does every culture, every tradition, every corner of human consciousness keep bringing him back? Let's walk with him for a while. Let's see where he leads us. Or maybe, let's see where we fall together. The archetype of the fool is older than the word itself. Long before jesters entertained kings, long before philosophers debated the nature of ignorance, the fool was already there, lurking in the shadows of our collective psyche. He appears in the myths of ancient Sumer, in the sacred clowns of Native American tribes, and in the trickster gods of Norse and Greek legend. He's the one who breaks the rules, who asks the wrong questions, who laughs when everyone else is praying. In medieval Europe, the court jester was the only person who could speak truth to power. Dressed in motley, bells jingling from his cap, he was granted a kind of freedom no one else possessed. He could mock the king, question the church, and point out the absurdity of war and vanity and pride. But he did it through laughter, through riddles, and through the safety of being dismissed as a fool. His wisdom was hidden in his foolishness. His insight came wrapped in a joke. Carl Jung recognized the fool as a fundamental archetype, a pattern that repeats across cultures because it touches something universal in the human experience. The fool represents the part of us that refuses to be tamed, that questions authority, that rejects the script we've been handed. He's the voice that says, "But why?" when everyone else has stopped asking. He's the child who points at the emperor and says, "He's naked," and we hate him for it. And we need him for it. The fool doesn't seek wisdom in the traditional sense. He doesn't study. He doesn't meditate under a tree for 40 days. He doesn't climb mountains to consult with hermits. Instead, he stumbles into wisdom by accident, by being open to experience, and by refusing to close himself off to the world. His ignorance is his greatest asset because it keeps him curious. He hasn't learned what's supposed to be impossible yet, so he tries it anyway. And sometimes, in that reckless attempt, he discovers something no one else would have found. In the tarot, the fool is numbered 0. Not 1, not the beginning, but the void before the beginning. 0 is a paradox. It's nothing, but it's also infinite potential. It's the blank page before the story starts, the silence before the first note is played. The fool stands at this threshold, neither here nor there, neither wise nor ignorant, nor alive nor dead. He exists in the liminal space between states, and that's where transformation happens. The fool carries a small bundle on a stick, everything he owns in the world. He travels light. He has no attachments, no possessions weighing him down. This is not poverty. This is freedom. He's not burdened by the past or the future. He exists entirely in the present moment, which is the only moment wisdom can ever be found. The past is memory, the future is fantasy, but the present, the now, that's where reality lives. And the fool lives there too, but the fool is not alone. At his heels, always, is a small white dog. Some say the dog represents loyalty, the instinctual self that follows us wherever we go. Others say it's a warning, the unconscious trying to pull us back from the edge before we fall. But the fool doesn't listen. He never listens, and that's the point. Wisdom isn't always about listening to warnings. Sometimes it's about ignoring them. Sometimes the cliff is exactly where you need to be, The search for wisdom has always been humanity's defining obsession. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, from Socrates drinking hemlock to the philosophers debating in Renaissance salons, we've been asking the same question for thousands of years. What does it mean to live well? What does it mean to know? And how do we get from ignorance to understanding? Most traditions answer this question with a path. Follow these steps, read these texts, practice these rituals, purify yourself, discipline yourself, transcend yourself. Wisdom, they say, is the reward for effort, the prize at the end of a long and difficult journey. And maybe they're right, but the fool offers a different answer. What if wisdom isn't something you earn? What if it's something you stumble into when you stop trying so hard? The ancient Greeks had two words for knowledge: episteme, which referred to intellectual knowledge, the kind you get from books and teachers and logical reasoning, and metis, which referred to practical wisdom, cunning, and the kind of intelligence that comes from experience, from paying attention, and from adapting to the situation in front of you. The fool has no episteme. He hasn't read the philosophers. He can't quote the classics. But he has metis in abundance. He knows how to survive. He knows how to laugh when things go wrong. He knows how to turn disaster into opportunity. In Zen Buddhism, there's a concept called shoshin, beginner's mind. It's the idea that approaching life with an attitude of openness and lack of preconceptions is the truest form of wisdom. The expert has closed doors. They know what works, what doesn't, what's possible, and what's not. But the beginner, the fool, doesn't know any of that yet. Every door is still open. Every possibility is still alive. The fool embodies shoshin perfectly. He doesn't know what he's supposed to think, so he thinks for himself. He doesn't know what he's supposed to feel, so he feels everything. The Sufi mystics tell a story about Nasreddin, the wise fool of Islamic tradition. One night, a neighbor finds him on his hands and knees under a street lamp, searching for something. "What are you looking for?" the neighbor asks. "I lost my key," Nasreddin replies. The neighbor gets down on his hands and knees to help. After a while, he asks, "Where exactly did you drop it?" Nasreddin points off into the darkness. "Over there." The neighbor is confused. "Then why are we searching here?" Nasreddin shrugs. "Because the light is better here. It's a joke, obviously. But like all the best jokes, it's also a profound truth. We search for wisdom where it's comfortable, where it's safe, and where the light is good. We look in books, in traditions, and in systems that promise certainty. But wisdom doesn't live in the light. It lives in the darkness, in the uncomfortable places, in the questions we're afraid to ask. The fool knows this. He's not afraid of the dark. He's not afraid of getting lost, because getting lost is how you find things you weren't looking for. The philosopher Socrates was called the wisest man in Athens, but he insisted he knew nothing. His entire method, the Socratic dialogue, was built on asking questions, not giving answers. He played the fool, pretending ignorance to expose the false certainty of others, and for this, he was sentenced to death. Athens couldn't tolerate a man who refused to pretend he had it all figured out. They needed their wise men to be wise, not foolish. But Socrates understood something they didn't. Wisdom begins with admitting you don't know. And that admission, that humility, that willingness to be wrong, that's the hardest thing in the world. Because we're terrified of being fools, we spend our entire lives trying to prove we're not stupid, not ignorant, and not lost. We build careers, reputations, and identities around the idea that we know what we're doing. We can't admit uncertainty. We can't admit mistakes. We can't admit that maybe, just maybe, we have no idea what's going on. And in that desperate need to appear wise, we close ourselves off to actual wisdom. We stop learning. We stop questioning. We stop growing. We become the opposite of the fool. We become rigid, defensive, and afraid. The fool, on the other hand, has no reputation to protect. He's already a fool. He's already at the bottom. And from the bottom, the only direction is up. Or maybe there is no up. Maybe there's just falling, endlessly, joyfully, into the unknown. In alchemy, There's a stage called the nigredo, the blackening, the process of breaking down before you can build up again. The alchemist takes the base metal and burns it, dissolves it, and reduces it to its essential components. It's a death, a descent into chaos. But it's necessary. You can't transform something until you've destroyed it first. The fool is always in the nigredo. He's always burning, always dissolving, always dying, and being reborn. He doesn't cling to who he was yesterday, because yesterday doesn't exist anymore. He meets each moment fresh, new, and unformed. The shadow side of the fool is the fool who never learns, the fool who mistakes ignorance for innocence, who uses "I didn't know" as an excuse for harm. This is the reckless fool, the irresponsible fool, the fool who burns down the house because he didn't think the candle would tip over. This fool isn't searching for wisdom, he's avoiding it. He's hiding behind his foolishness, using it as a shield against accountability. And that's not wisdom, that's cowardice. But the fool we're talking about, the archetypal fool, the one who appears in myths and dreams and tarot cards, he's different. He's not ignorant by choice, he's ignorant by nature. He's the tabula rasa, the blank slate, the consciousness before conditioning. He hasn't learned the lies yet. He hasn't accepted the compromises. He hasn't made peace with the world as it is. He still believes in magic. He still believes in possibility. And that belief, that refusal to give up on wonder, that's the beginning of wisdom. In the Arthurian legends, Percival is the pure fool who sets out on the quest for the Holy Grail. He's naive, untrained, and ignorant of courtly manners. The knights laugh at him. But Percival succeeds where the wise and experienced knights fail. Why? Because he asks the right question. When he encounters the wounded Fisher King and the mysterious Grail procession, he asks, "Whom does the Grail serve?" It's a simple question, a foolish question. But it's the question that heals the king and restores the wasteland. The wise knights knew too much. They knew what questions were appropriate and what questions were safe. Percival didn't know any of that, so he asked for the truth. The fool's search for wisdom is not linear. It's not a journey from point A to point B. It's a spiral, a wandering, a series of accidents and detours and wrong turns that somehow, miraculously, lead somewhere. The fool doesn't follow maps because maps are drawn by people who've already made the journey, and the fool's journey is always new, always different, always his own. In the hero's journey, as outlined by Joseph Campbell, the hero leaves home, faces trials, gains wisdom, and returns transformed. But the fool's journey is different. The fool never really leaves home because he has no home. He never really returns because there's nowhere to return to. He's always in motion, always between worlds, always in transition. His journey is eternal. And maybe that's the point. Maybe wisdom isn't a destination. Maybe it's the journey itself, the endless falling, the perpetual becoming. The mystics understood this. They spoke of the via negativa, the negative way, the path of unknowing. To find God, they said, you must strip away everything you think you know about God. Every concept, every image, every belief. You must enter the cloud of unknowing, the darkness where certainty dissolves and only presence remains. The fool lives in this cloud. He doesn't have answers, but he has presence. He doesn't have knowledge, but he has awareness. And awareness, pure awareness, is the root of all wisdom. Consider the koan, the Zen riddle designed to break the mind's habit of rational thought. What is the sound of one hand clapping? It's a foolish question. It makes no sense. But that's the point. The student sits with the koan, struggles with it, and tries to solve it like a puzzle. And eventually, if they're lucky, something breaks. The mind gives up. The need for answers dissolves. And in that dissolution, something else emerges. Not knowledge, not understanding, but a direct experience of reality as it is, before words, before concepts, before the illusion of separation between knower and known. The fool is the living koan. He doesn't make sense. He can't be explained. He exists to confuse us, to shake us out of our comfortable assumptions. He's the glitch in the matrix, the crack in the facade, the moment when everything you thought was solid turns out to be smoke. In tarot readings, when the Fool appears, it's often interpreted as a call to take a risk, to leap into the unknown, to trust the journey even when you can't see where it leads. But it's also a warning. The Fool can fall. He can fail. He can walk right off that cliff and plummet into the abyss. And maybe he does. Maybe he falls every single time. But here's the secret. The falling is the point. The falling is the wisdom. Because wisdom isn't safety. Wisdom isn't certainty. Wisdom is the willingness to keep falling, to keep questioning, and to keep opening yourself to the possibility that everything you believe might be wrong. It's the courage to be a fool in a world that demands you be wise. It's the humility to admit you don't know in a culture that punishes ignorance. The Fool teaches us that wisdom and foolishness are not opposites. They're two sides of the same coin. The wise person knows they are a fool. The fool who seeks wisdom is already wise. It's a paradox, a loop, a spiral that turns back on itself endlessly. And maybe that's frustrating. Maybe we want clear answers, simple truths, and a path we can follow. But the Fool refuses to give us that. He offers us something better. He offers us freedom. In Norse mythology, Odin, the All-Father, the god of wisdom, hangs himself on the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights, sacrificing himself to gain the knowledge of the runes. He pierces himself with his own spear. He starves, he suffers, and at the end, he gains wisdom. But what kind of wisdom? The runes are symbols, mysteries, and riddles. They don't give answers, they open doors. Odin, the wisest of gods, becomes a seeker, a wanderer, a figure who disguises himself as an old man, who trades his eye for a drink from the well of knowledge. He's a god who acts like a fool. And maybe that's the highest wisdom of all. The Fool's relationship with language is complicated. He speaks in riddles, jokes, puns, and wordplay. He takes language apart and puts it back together in strange ways. This isn't random. Language shapes thought. The words we use determine what we can think, what we can imagine, and what we can become. The Fool disrupts language because he disrupts thought. He forces us to see the world differently, to question the categories we've accepted, and to notice the contradictions we've been ignoring. Shakespeare's fools are the smartest characters in his plays. They see through the pretensions of the powerful. They speak truths that no one else dares to speak. But they do it through humor, through mockery, through a performance of foolishness that gives them immunity. They're too foolish to be taken seriously, which means they can say anything. And in that freedom, they become prophets. In the tarot, the Fool's journey is the journey through the major arcana, from 0 to 21, from innocence to completion, but it's not a straight line. The Fool doesn't graduate from foolishness to wisdom. He carries his foolishness with him the entire way. He's the fool at the beginning, and he's still the fool at the end. The journey doesn't change who he is. It reveals who he's always been. The magician comes after the fool in the tarot sequence. The magician has tools, skills, and power. He can manifest his will in the world. But the magician was once the fool. And the fool is always potentially the magician. The difference is consciousness, intention, and direction. The fool stumbles into power, the magician wields it, but both are searching. Both are learning, both are falling. The search for wisdom is dangerous, because wisdom is dangerous. It changes you. It destroys your certainties, your identities, and your comfortable lies. It forces you to see things you'd rather not see, to know things you'd rather not know. The fool knows this. He knows that wisdom comes at a cost, and he pays it anyway. He keeps walking toward the cliff. He keeps asking the questions. He keeps laughing at the absurdity of it all. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the journey after death is described as a series of visions, terrifying deities, peaceful deities, lights, and darkness. The soul is instructed to recognize these visions as projections of its own mind, to see through the illusion, and to understand that everything it encounters is itself. But the soul, confused, frightened, and clinging to ego, usually fails. It gets caught in the illusion. It forgets who it is, and so it's reborn, sent back into the cycle to try again. The fool is that soul, always forgetting, always remembering, always beginning again. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about the three metamorphoses of the spirit. First, the spirit becomes a camel, a beast of burden, carrying the weight of tradition, duty, and obligation. Then, the camel becomes a lion, who roars, "I will," and fights against the "thou shalt" of authority. And finally, the lion becomes a child, who plays, who creates, who forgets, and who begins anew. The child is the fool. The child doesn't know what's impossible. The child invents new games, new worlds, and new ways of being. The child is the ultimate wisdom because the child has not yet learned to be afraid of being wrong. But we can't stay children forever. We grow up. We learn. We become wise, or we think we do. And in becoming wise, we lose something. We lose the openness, the wonder, and the willingness to not know. We become experts, authorities, and people with answers. And we forget how to be fools. And in forgetting, we stop growing. We stop changing. We stop living. The fool's search for wisdom is not about accumulating knowledge. It's about staying open, staying curious, and staying willing to be surprised. It's about recognizing that every moment is new, every encounter is unique, and every experience is an opportunity to learn something you didn't know before. It's about living in a state of perpetual beginner's mind, where nothing is taken for granted, where everything is possible. In the Christian tradition, there's the concept of the holy fool, the Eurodivi in Russian Orthodoxy, the person who renounces worldly wisdom and social norms to pursue a deeper spiritual truth. They wander the streets, speaking in riddles, behaving strangely, challenging the comfortable faith of the respectable. They're dismissed as mad, as foolish, as touched by God or by demons. But they see things others don't see. They speak truths others won't speak. They live in a different reality, one where the distinctions between wisdom and madness blur. The fool is always transgressing boundaries. He crosses borders, both physical and psychological. He moves between worlds, between states of being, and between the sacred and the profane. He doesn't respect the rules because he doesn't understand why the rules exist. And in that innocence, that ignorance, he exposes the arbitrariness of the rules, the way they're constructed, and the way they serve certain interests and not others. But the fool is not a revolutionary. He's not trying to overthrow the system. He doesn't have an agenda. He's just being himself, which is to say, he's being no one, nothing, the void, before identity forms. And in that void, there's a kind of purity, a kind of freedom that the rest of us have lost. The shadow of the search for wisdom is the trap of thinking you've found it. Once you believe you're wise, you stop searching, you stop questioning. You become the thing you once opposed, rigid, certain, closed. The fool never falls into this trap because the fool never claims to be wise. He's always the fool, always ignorant, always learning. And that humility, that refusal to claim expertise, is what keeps him wise. In the Upanishads, there's a teaching, neti, neti, which means not this, not that. It's the practice of negation, of stripping away false identifications until you reach the true self, which is beyond all labels, all concepts, all definitions. The fool embodies neti neti. He's not this, not that. He's nothing you can pin down, nothing you can explain, nothing you can control. He slips through your fingers, like water, like air, like the space between thoughts. The fool's wisdom is the wisdom of emptiness. Not emptiness as absence, but emptiness as potentiality, as the ground from which everything arises. In Buddhism, sunyata, emptiness, is the ultimate truth. All phenomena are empty of inherent existence. They arise dependent on causes and conditions. They're impermanent, interconnected, constantly changing. To realize this is to realize wisdom. And the fool realizes it without trying, without effort, because he has no investment in solidity, no attachment to permanence. He's always already empty. The paradox of the fool is that he's both the beginning and the end of the journey. He's the zero and the infinite. He contains all possibilities because he's committed to none. He's the question before the answer, the silence before the word, the darkness before the dawn. And in that pre-beginning state, he holds all wisdom, all knowledge, all truth, in potential form, waiting to be actualized, waiting to be discovered, waiting to fall into being. When we look at the fool standing at the edge of the cliff, we see danger, we see recklessness, we see someone who's about to make a terrible mistake. But maybe that's not what's happening. Maybe the fool isn't about to fall. Maybe he's about to fly. Maybe the cliff isn't a cliff at all. Maybe it's a threshold, a doorway, a portal into another way of being. Maybe wisdom isn't about avoiding the fall. Maybe it's about learning to love it. The search for wisdom, ultimately, is the search for yourself. Not the self you think you are, the self you've been told you are, the self you've constructed out of stories and memories and beliefs. But the self beneath all that, the self that was there before you learned language, before you learned fear, before you learned to be ashamed of not knowing, the fool is that self, the original self, the true self, the self that's been waiting for you to remember it, to claim it, to become it again. And maybe that's why the fool keeps appearing in our stories, our myths, our dreams, because we need him. We need the reminder that it's okay to not know, that it's okay to be lost, that it's okay to fall. We need the permission to stop pretending we have it all figured out. We need the freedom to be foolish, to make mistakes, to laugh at ourselves, to start over, to begin again, always again, forever again. The fool's flower, the one he carries so carelessly in his hand, is often interpreted as a symbol of innocence, of beauty, of the present moment. He doesn't preserve it. He doesn't protect it. He just holds it, lightly, as he walks toward whatever comes next. And when he falls, he'll probably drop it, and that's okay. Because there will be other flowers. There will be other moments. There will be other chances to fall, to rise, to begin. In the end, the fool's search for wisdom is not about finding anything. It's about searching. It's about the journey, the process, the endless questioning that never reaches a conclusion because there is no conclusion. There's just this moment, this step, this breath, this fall. And in that fall, in that eternal descent into the unknown, the fool finds something the wise spend their whole lives looking for and never find. Freedom. Freedom from certainty. Freedom from fear. Freedom from the need to be right, to be smart, to be anything other than exactly what he is in this moment, which is nothing, which is everything, which is the zero that contains infinity. The fool teaches us that wisdom is not something you possess, it's something you become. And you become it by letting go of everything you think you know, everything you think you are, everything you think you need. You become it by walking toward the edge, by trusting the fall, by laughing at the absurdity of existence, and choosing to exist anyway, fully, completely, foolishly. So maybe the question isn't whether the fool ever finds wisdom. Maybe the question is whether we have the courage to be fools ourselves, to admit we don't know, to step off the cliff, to trust that the falling itself is the answer we've been searching for all along. Because the fool knows something we've forgotten. You can't fall if you never believed you could fly, and you can't fly if you're too afraid to fall. The search continues. It always continues. The fool walks on, one foot in front of the other, the dog at his heels, the cliff approaching, the flower in his hand, the infinite sky opening before him. He doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't need to. He's already there. He's always been there. And so have we, if we'd only stop long enough to notice. The fool and the search for wisdom, they're the same thing. The fool is the search. The search is the fool. And wisdom? Wisdom is the moment you realize you've been falling all along, and you were never meant to land.